hit the millionaire mark when I was 31, and it's still like onward and upward for us as we continue our wealth building journey, but then also help other medical professionals learn how to do the same thing. First off, thank you for having me again. I really appreciate it. I'm Kristin Burton. I am a PA and practice in critical care medicine. I've been a PA for 7.5 years, and for the last 5 years or so, I've also been the founder of a business dedicated to teaching medical professionals all things personal finance. And so that's my passion, and that's what I'm really here to talk to you guys about mostly.
I think we connected on
Yes.
a long time ago because I also have an interest in personal finance. I don't have your expertise, but I think it's interesting to learn about and talk about because nobody does or not enough.
Yes, and the nature of our profession for unfortunately a lot of folks is a lot of student loan debt. And so really knowing how to manage money right after graduation is actually a really big deal.
Yeah, because it's debt, but then it's also we have fairly good salaries
Yeah.
and the balance between how to manage both of those things can be a little tough coming out of school
Yep,
for
for sure.
sure. So just a little bit, tell us, which I also just love PA. I don't side hustles. I don't know if that term is still relevant, but like PAs who are doing other things and who have
Yeah.
passions beyond just medicine or the patient care side of things. So tell us just what does a week look like for you when you're working and then also doing kind of your finance stuff on the side?
So I actually work kind of an atypical schedule. Up until just last month, I would work 7 12-hour shifts in a row at night, 8P to 8A, and I would cross cover 3 different ICUs and the rest of our pulmonary critical care service. So that's like the main gig. And then I would have 2 weeks off. And so, to be honest, working 7 12-hour shifts in a row, if anyone's ever done that, it doesn't leave a lot of time for anything else. And so, most of my business happens when I'm not working clinical shifts. And that's just kind of how it goes. I just dropped down to a point 0.6 FTE or part time last month. And so now I'll have fewer clinical shifts, still very similar job, but fewer shifts, and have more time for the business and more time to do other things.
Yeah, the creative outlet side of it is a lot of fun.
Yes.
So since we last talked, which I'll have to look back and see how long ago it was. It was right after I feel like you started. It was a while.
It was a long time ago. Yes.
But since we last talked, you have paid off all of your student loans, and it was a very impressive number. Talk us through that process of how you did that, how you navigated learning how to do that,
Mhm.
and maybe share some of your favorite resources for that.
Yeah. I think I had paid them off when we talked last time, I think.
Really? Like, maybe you had
Yeah.
just then I just remember seeing, like, your Facebook post or your
Yeah.
Instagram post, and it was so exciting.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So I, like most folks, graduated with $161,000 in student loan debt. The bulk of mine was actually private, some was federal, and I really didn't know what to do with it per se, but I had this sort of desire to build wealth and have financial freedom. I just didn't know how to go about it. And at the time I felt like, oh, the main barrier to this is my student loan debt, and so I'm going to attack that. And that's what I did. I treated work almost like a residency or fellowship. I worked 80 plus hours a week. We lived off of about $40,000 during this time period. And so a lot of extra earnings, right? A lot of extra working, put all of that money to the student loan debt and paid it off in 16 months, which was really exciting. And it increased a lot of cash flow, but I pretty quickly realized that it wasn't exactly what I had been after the whole time, and that there was going to be more to the process of creating the lifestyle I wanted than
Yeah.
just getting rid of the student loan debt. So I went down the rabbit hole of learning how to invest in not only like the stock bond market, but investment real estate as well. And we've been channeling that ever since.
Yeah.
We hit the millionaire mark when I was 31, and it's still like onward and upward for us as we continue our wealth building journey, but then also help other medical professionals learn how to do the same thing.
Yes, perfect. Why do you think it's still taboo to talk about money and have transparency around financial stuff? I think it's getting less, but I feel like it's still there.
Yeah, part of it is that money for most people isn't ever just about money. It's about a lot of other weird emotions and baggage that we carry from maybe things growing up or maybe shame surrounding like a partnership where you have debt and the other person doesn't. You feel uncomfortable with that, or there's all sorts of layers to it. It's never really as simple as the numbers. And I think that's what spills over when people feel uncomfortable saying my salary or whatever. Maybe they're afraid that it's higher than everyone they grew up with and they're going to make other people uncomfortable. Or maybe they feel like I'm not earning as much as my counterparts. Are they going to think that I'm less valuable or that I'm not as good at my job because I feel like my salary is lower? There's extra pieces to it. It's never about the number, though. I think it really genuinely is always about underlying emotions and really ultimately a lot of shame surrounding all things finance.
Yeah, like somebody feels like they're not doing enough. I'm in a, you probably are too, the PA Moms like Facebook group, and
Mhm.
there's one about money. And I see the flip side. I see people posting anonymously because they're like, I have this much saved and this is how well I'm doing, but they don't say that. And then on the flip side, they're like, I don't feel like I've saved enough and I feel like I'm behind. And they don't want to publicly say that. It is a kind of weird thing. And that's something I found, even talking with very close friends, sometimes it's hard to break down those barriers of let's really talk about this so that we can help each other and make sure we're on track and share tips, because
Yes.
that's the only way that we can learn and try to do as well as we can. um with paying off your student loans, I know you like worked super hard. Was it hard afterwards? I know you said then you like realized, oh, that's not just the final goal,
Mhm.
to shift out of that grinding mentality? Or what steps then did you take to make a financial plan?
Yeah. I will say the main part of that for me that was the grind was the extra hours. And really stopped doing that after I paid off my student loan debt. I worked some extra during COVID. That was really mostly to help my team. Obviously, we work in ICU, so we were drowning, and less about money. And so, from a financial standpoint, like the lack of extra shifts, that made a big difference in feeling the grind. But what I had also learned throughout that process was that there was a lot more to, like, creating the life I wanted than just the lifestyle that we all see. And so we actually didn't make a lot of big lifestyle changes in terms of upgrading the house, upgrading cars, things like that, because I had figured out that those weren't the joy creators in my life. And so I ended up having the ability to take that sort of skill set and then go, okay, we can continue to live on less than our income, even without all these extra shifts. And all we're doing now is just redirecting that money into something that's honestly way more fun, right? To building wealth versus paying it towards the debt that's already there. And so it didn't feel in any way negative, to be honest. We still, to this day, allocate at least 50% of our income towards the wealth building process. And we probably will always. We did that, and everyone said, "Oh, as soon as you have a child, you'll stop doing that." Our daughters too, we're still doing it, and so it's just one of those things where I think I've realized, like, the things that really matter to me are time with family, intentional moments, experiences, and some of that lifestyle stuff never mattered to begin with, and I got lucky because I learned that early. It's harder when you've made those big lifestyle changes to then go, "Oh, wow, I'm creating a life I don't love. I can't afford this. I'm stuck on the financial hamster wheel, always having to work just to keep up." It's
Mhm.
hard to undo it. So if you can be one of those people who on the front end says, "Let me figure out how to really create a joyful life without spending 100% of my income," you'll be light years ahead of the rest of us.
Yeah. Well, let's talk through, we have an audience clearly of like healthcare professionals who you talk to, and PA specifically.
Yeah.
Can we talk through, like, even from the beginning, like pre-PA, like either in undergrad, saving for PA school, getting ready for that process, and any thoughts or advice you have from that stage to PA school to that like new grad stage? And then we'll go
Yes.
beyond that. But yeah,
The number
what
one
can
thing I see people doing that's honestly a huge mistake in the pre-PA phase is just having this assumption of I'm going to have a lot of student loan debt and I'm going to have a good salary and it will all work out. That is a pretty bold, big assumption that doesn't have any sort of mathematical support for it. And so then the big thing you need to do is go, okay, my big goal in the back of my mind is to have a debt to income ratio less than 1. I think I mentioned that last time, meaning my total student loan debt when I graduated would be less than my first year annual income. Those things are easy to figure out. You're applying to schools, you look at what's the tuition, what's my living expense going to be, add it all up, and then you Google average PA starting salary in the state I think I'm going to work in, and you have the answer. And then if you get that number and you're pretty close to the mark, close to, let's say, make this up, you're gonna owe 115K and you're gonna earn 110. Then you go, okay, I'm pretty close. This is a pretty good plan. Like this, I like this. This is gonna be something I can deal with after graduation. If you're looking at that and you're like, wow, this number is gonna be 3 to 1, meaning I'm gonna finish everything, the final graduate program, and I'm gonna owe 330K, but now I'm gonna earn 110, then you need to realize that you're putting yourself in a situation where you're going to be forced to really consider things like public service loan forgiveness or maybe taxable loan forgiveness, which isn't the best plan for most folks. And so, if you're doing that, you need to recognize at the very outset, I'm going to be making some sacrifice later because I'm going to have to seek out qualifying employers so that I can do public service loan forgiveness and address this big mountain of debt I'm creating. Otherwise, your financial life for those first 5, 10 years out of graduation is gonna be really hard if you don't have something like that to fall back on. Having those conversations with yourself before you step in the door of PA school is way more important than just signing up for stuff and going, "Oh, it'll be all right later." I think very few people realize how truly difficult it is to make a $3,000 a month minimum student loan payment for 10 years. That's a big cash flow suck. If you're one of those people where you're like, "I know I'm gonna be in private practice dermatology. I know I am." Great. You can't afford to have a debt to income ratio of 3 to 1, or your life's gonna be pretty hard, and your life's gonna be hard enough through the program. You want things to be easy post-graduation.
I'm thinking
So
like that would still be pretty tough.
yeah. Yes, do these things on the front end, and if you get into a program, be excited, but then really count the cost and look at it and go, "Is this the right move? Do I need to take a gap year and reapply and try to have some ulterior options that maybe aren't a private program, aren't so expensive so that my post-grad life matter and can work?" That season matters too, just as much as getting into a program and doing the program. So don't negate that. Don't just go, "Oh, blinders on, everything's gonna be fine. Where do I sign for the loans?"
I think that comes down to deciding between programs
Yeah.
also and
Yes.
looking at financially, is there one that makes more sense? So, two of the programs I got into, one was a state funded school. The tuition was a third of the private school I got into. And then on top of that, the city was a smaller, more suburban city versus a larger, more expensive city. So
Yep.
it would have been closer to probably a 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 versus going to a state program, which a state program is not always an option, but looking at like you can, I wouldn't say money is the first consideration, or maybe for some people, but it should be considered.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
And decide
yes.
like when you graduate too, and how long a program is. Are you going to have
Yeah,
more earning potential? Are you going to graduate sooner versus taking longer or having a longer graduate? There's so much to at least look at and at least think about.
yes, and really run numbers, like,
Yeah.
actually get out calculators and literally have numbers on paper. It will really solidify your decision-making process, and I don't tell you this as someone who did this well. I went to a private PA program, I did this very poorly, I had no planning whatsoever prior to going. I did exactly what I'm saying not to do. I'm just like, "Oh, where are the loans? Where do I sign? I need to get in, I need to go." And so I'm telling you this only from life experience and working with a whole bunch of medical professionals and the problems that they faced after graduation. So if you're thinking like, "Oh, wow, I'm not doing that right," neither did I. You're in good company.
It's almost like somebody wants to give me money. Like they believe in me. They know, like they just want to support me. No, they
Yeah.
want you to pay them back. But
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. So then in PA school, and I think just because you have talked to so many people and seen all of these stories, what should people be doing or thinking about as far as their loans
Mhm.
or things they can do to set them up? It's hard because you can't work. Like, you're not working in PA school.
Yeah.
How can you set yourself up for success in that stage?
Yeah, you can't work. And honestly, trying to work would, for some people, it works out, but for most people, it's a recipe for disaster. So you have to accept that you're on a fixed income, so to speak, based on your loans, but you can effectively budget your loans on a monthly basis throughout the entire PA program. And that's probably the most important thing that you can do to actually graduate and be off to the races. I'll say 95% of the medical professionals I talk to don't budget on any consistent basis. And it shows in where they're at financially. Really, the habit being built, the keystone habit of having some type of consistent budget or cash flow system that you use, you can start that in a program. And in some ways, it's a more important time to do it because you really don't want to be running out of student loans. And you also don't want to be taking out more than you need just because you're disorganized. The other part that's interesting is PA program is a season where you feel as though you cannot get anything else done. Like the idea of keeping a budget feels like something that you'll never have time for or never be willing to go, okay, I can spare these 30 minutes. But I'll tell you, even though some of that gets better in seasons of life post graduation, that feeling never really fully goes away of, gosh, this is one of those tasks that I just don't have time for. And so if you can train yourself in a season of a lot of work to go, I've got 30 minutes, I'm going to keep a budget and do it every time. Then the second you graduate and you get the big income, all of a sudden you're like, okay, I've got this figured out. This is ingrained. And so now I'm just looking at different numbers, but I have the process.
Yeah. Are there any tools you love for budgeting? Are you like a spreadsheet girl? Are you a, what do they say, YNAB? Is that the one that a lot of
Yeah,
people
that's a common
use?
one. It varies. I personally use every dollar, but I will say if you really want to be the most effective budgeter, I have a system that I'll have people use at the beginning of the process. It's actually in Excel. And the reason for it is I'll separate out what I kind of call progress dollars, which is money that you're allocating towards your financial goals, whether that be additional non minimum debt payments, money towards savings, money towards investments. Now, of course, in PA school, you're not gonna have progress dollars, right? You're just gonna be getting by, and that's okay. So you could use every
Survival.
dollar. You could use YNAB, Mint, any of those are totally fine. I've used the free version of every dollar for probably 10 years.
Yeah.
But if you're post-grad life and you're looking at this and you're going, "Why aren't I getting ahead? Why aren't I getting the traction? How did that lady say she became a millionaire?" Like, how does that work? It's because of the progress dollars being too small. And so having it separated out on your budget into a section where you can truly see, am I allocating 20% of my income towards financial progress, which is always the goal? And if not, if it's not set up that way, it's very sometimes difficult to tell if you're doing that. Most budgeting apps will put savings together and debt together, and they might even give you a pie chart of this much went to savings, this much went to debt. But if all the debt payment was a minimum payment, that's different than if a fourth of it was a minimum payment and you made a big extra. And
Yeah.
so those apps don't always help you with viewing the 30,000-foot view of where the money's allocated.
Okay, that's helpful. So yeah, so budgeting, I would say would be helpful. I had a weird PA school experience where I lived at home.
Oh,
So
nice.
my parents were my budget, but
Yeah,
I didn't really have for
yeah.
the first year expenses because of that.
Mhm.
I was living there. I didn't pay rent.
Yeah.
Um, but after PA school being married, I definitely we had to look at that a lot when my husband was in med school. But I saw classmates who would, not to like throw them under the bus, but they would eat out every single day.
Yeah.
I'm like, how are you going to Starbucks every morning? How are
Yep.
you going to eat lunch every day? Like, how is this happening? What are you doing? And I think it was that thing of almost a feeling that money's not real.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, this is what
Or
it
like
is.
I'm hard. Yeah.
It doesn't add up. And I know
Yeah.
people have said if you cut the coffees out, it doesn't save that much, whatever. But I feel like in that phase of
It
life,
does. Yeah.
being a little frugal can
Yes.
make a big difference. And I think I learned that afterwards. And I would love to know what your like interest on your loans was. There were times I didn't have that much. I took out about $49,000, all
Mhm.
federal. And I ended up paying back with interest when all was said and done I paid mine about 14 months. I think it ended up being around like 75,000 that I paid back.
Yeah.
And the reason I started paying it back is I looked and it was adding $100 a day
Yeah.
to what I owed. And I was like, what is happening? What? This doesn't make sense. I don't understand this.
Yeah.
And
And you
then,
didn't even have that much in the
and I
grand
didn't
scheme of
have
PA
much.
debt. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm gonna go.
I know.
Not keep doing this. So that was like a eye opener.
Yes.
Yeah. Don't think about the loans at all during PA school. Then afterwards I was like, oh no,
Yeah.
these are real, and now this is coming out of my paycheck and I don't like it. It
Yeah.
was a good investment. It was a good investment though.
Of course, yeah, and for most of us, like, we're not getting into graduate school and through it without some type of student loan debt. So you
Yeah.
can't create that narrative of, "Oh, you should never have it," or "This is horrible that you took out student loans." It's really a matter of your situation and how it compares to your income. But I do wanna say, like, we both are sharing this story of paying off student loans really fast, which is cool, but that's not the norm. If you're listening to this and you're like, "What?" Very short periods of time, both of us under 2 years. Most medical professionals take quite a bit longer. Obviously, the standard term is 10 years. And even people doing an accelerated pathway of paying extra every month and trying to get it done sooner tend to be on the 5 to 7 year time horizon. You have to make big payments unless you have a very small amount of student loan debt, which would be great for you if you did. But unless you have that, you have to make really big payments to do it the way that we're talking about. And most medical professionals, 95 out of 100, should be already investing and building wealth as they deal with the student loans. So don't miss that piece. Don't listen to this and go, oh, I've got to pay them off super quick. If you can, great. What I'll tell people is, hey, if you can do it in less than 2 years and you want to hold on investing, there's opportunity costs to that. But hey, you can do it. It's a reasonable choice. But if you say, I'm going to pay off my loans in 6 years and I'm not going to do anything else with money that whole entire time, I'm not going to invest, I'm not going to do any of that, you're going to put yourself in a spot where you're going to have a hard time even retiring at 65, 67,
Yeah.
let alone ever having the opportunity to retire early or do things like that. I had to
Yeah, and
put
that's
that.
what I wanted to and that's good. I want to move on to that because I feel like we have talked and focused on student loans, which are important piece of it. But that second piece, and when this whole like financial education comes in,
Yeah.
is understanding like what you're going to have to do to invest and set yourself up. So this is different. So my parents were both teachers. They both got state pension plans.
Yep.
So they worked their 30 years. They both retired in their 50s
Oh,
and get money. And that's fantastic for them. For medical professionals, that's not a common
yeah.
setup for us. So we have to figure it out on our own and build our wealth and learn about it. And it's difficult. And there's so much being thrown at us. And then you're not sure who to ask or who to trust. And
Yeah.
there's a lot to it. So when it comes to investing, are there pretty standard, like everyone should do this kind of thing? Or what are some thoughts on how everyone should approach that part of it?
Okay, so I'll give some general rules of thumb, knowing that they're not going to be applicable to every person and every tax bracket and every scenario. But general rules of thumb. Every single person should get 100% of their employer match in their 401k or 403b. And when you're looking at jobs, you should very much consider that employer match an important part of your compensation. So if one job offers you a 10% match, the other one offers you zero, that's a big change in your pay. So that's going to be a very important first step for everyone. It doesn't really matter what the rest of your financial situation looks like. That's an easy decision because it's a 100% return on your investment before stock market return. So very easy. Almost every single medical professional should do that. The second thing almost every medical professional should do, especially early in their career, is start investing in a Roth IRA.
Mhm.
The way the Roth IRA works is fundamentally different than the way a traditional 401k works, where you're investing money after you've paid income taxes, but then you get tax-free money on the back end in retirement. And so that should be most people's next step because as your career moves along, your income increases, your tax bracket will increase, right? And so the earlier you are in your career, in theory, the lower tax bracket you'll be in relative to future. And so it makes the most sense to be sacking those dollars into your Roth IRA. Now, a lot of folks don't do that part because the 401k is easy, right? Like you go to the HR people and they hand you everything you need to do. And they're like, what do you want to select? And you do it. And that's that. But a Roth IRA is not associated with your employer. So you would be doing that on your own and opening that account and investing outside of work. And that extra piece of feeling like this is a hurdle that I don't know how to overcome, sometimes that's just enough to stop people from moving forward. But those are probably the two things that almost every single medical professional in the first year of practice should be already up and running on.
Yeah, I agree. And I think hopefully most employers are offering something along those lines, or it's something that people are looking for as part of their benefits package. I want to know a little bit more. You touched on a little bit at the beginning. So I feel like you're in an interesting spot where you've paid back your loans, kind of hit some of your financial goals. What are you doing? So, as a real life example, like what are you doing to build wealth and what does that look like? Is that retiring early? Is that setting your kids and future grandkids up? What are your realistic goals? Because we hear that a lot. I want to retire at 35. I want to, do all these crazy things. But as like a normal person doing this, what are your goals?
I'm glad you think I'm normal. Oh, it's funny. So they've changed. When I first learned about investing and wealth building, I heard a rule. It's actually from Rob Berger from the book Retire Before Mom and Dad. Hey, if you want to retire in 15 years, then you would invest 50% of your income. And so I'm like, we can probably do that. And so we did. That's what we started doing was investing across multiple accounts. So we use two 401ks, two HSAs, two Roth IRAs, a taxable brokerage account, and a solo 401k to meet the goal. But we were investing 50% of gross income across those accounts so that we could retire in our 40s if we wanted. And then as you like learn and grow and life shifts and changes, I realized I don't know that I want to retire in my 40s. I'm a person that's really driven by growth. I'm like, I don't know what I would do. I would have small children at that time still like modeling their lives after me. And I thought, what if she doesn't ever see me working? That could be odd. So that's changed. Right now, what kind of the focus is creating the best lifestyle for our family. And so that requires creating income sources outside of our W-2 jobs so that we can say, okay, it's time to reduce hours, which I just did, or it's time to change jobs to something that's a smaller time commitment or more flexible or gives us the ability to do more prolonged travel. Not so much to retire from everything, but to retire from the things we don't want to do. And we're also really interested at this phase in creating generational wealth. So all we've done so far is focus on the generation below us, but our ultimate goal is to go at least 2 generations, if not 3. And then the third thing that we've been building is our charitable impact. So every year when I create our financial goals, that is just as important to me as the other stuff. And so every year we increase what we do charitably and put a lot of thought into where that money should go so that we can not only build wealth for our family, but also see what can we do to improve the community around us. So it's multifactorial. It's changed over time. But if you're someone who does say, hey, I want to be one of those crazy people and invest and retire really early, you can, but you got to put up some big numbers investing wise. And if you're throwing 6% in your 401k, that's not going to do the trick.
That's what it's funny because my husband thinks I'm crazy I'm very interested in it. So I'm always like reading and learning and looking at stuff. And I'll be like, oh, I want to make it so you could retire if you wanted to in your 40. And he's like, I don't want to. And I'm like, I don't really want to either. I would like the option to. I would like to know if something life-changing happened and we wanted to change something, we could. Like, I'm not saying you have to retire, but I feel like having those goals in mind does make it a little bit easier to, I don't know, not feel like I'm missing out now looking towards the future. Because there's a lot of FOMO and other people doing things and think like,
Yeah.
oh, I want to do that. Like I could buy that. I could buy this thing I don't need or do this and having to really decide, is it worth it? Which I don't know if you do this, but one thing that we do is if there is something that I like want to buy or a trip or whatever, I think of it in terms of how much I've had to work for that, like shifts and hours. And I'll be like, okay, that was like 8 hours work, or that was a lot of work. Is it worth it?
Yeah.
And for me, that puts it in perspective to decide if it's a good thing to move forward with or not.
That is a very good life hack. Things feel a lot differently when you think of it in terms of time spent instead of just swipe the card and it's over and then that's that.
Yeah, it's too easy to swipe the card. Or if you memorize your card number like me, that'll get you into trouble too.
Makes online shopping very simple, doesn't it?
It does. I'm like, oh, I can't sleep. Let me just do a little shopping. No,
Yeah.
that's terrible. Don't do that. If anyone is, okay, this is interesting. I'm overwhelmed because I feel like that's where most people are.
Yeah.
Do you recommend they just go to start learning stuff about money, finances, personal finance to start that process?
So there's a lot of different ways. Honestly, in the kind of pre-PA space, I think that the easiest thing to do to have trickle information and not the fire hose, I actually have a free guide for students and people pre-medical professional. So we can link that here. You can download it. But when you download it, you'll be on my email newsletter. So it's literally one single time a week on Mondays, and I will put some links to longer form content like blog stuff if you want to deeper dive into some of these things, or links to live events that we do with other financial industry experts as well. But then I'll just put like some pearl of education in personal finance for that week. And if you just start to read those, I think you'll get some information and get your feet wet and feeling, okay, this is a really low energy for me in terms of time spent activity where I can learn and grow over time. If you want some books to dive into, The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins is a great book. It's very introductory, but it's a great introductory investing book. Retire Before Mom and Dad by Rob Berger is a really good book as well. The Dave Ramsey books will help you from a debt standpoint, but they tend to go in the, hey, stay in your lane, do debt only, don't do anything else. And that's very dangerous for people with multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt. So you have to take that for what it's worth. In terms of podcasts, I like the Money Guy show as well. So those are some other resources you can dive into if you just want to get more information and learn and feel like you're moving through your education with a little bit of financial education on the side.
Perfect. That gives people a place to start. And of course, they can come follow you. I love your little graphics. I think those are the most helpful for me. I always save them when it like compares. And it'll just kind of, I just think seeing that if you invest, this way versus this way, what that's going to look like.
Yes.
It's just a good reminder. And I think when you're, again, scrolling through your feed and all the things you can buy, to have that and be like, oh yeah, we don't need to do that right now. Yes. We need to do investing. It's perfect.
Yes. Thank you for doing this. I'm so glad there is someone like you helping the pre-PA space. I know I definitely needed this when I was at that phase of my life and it didn't exist. And I hope everyone listening is as grateful as I would have been had I been in your shoes for this level of information and insight. So really cool what you do.
Thank you for sharing all of your helpful information and getting it out to everybody.